With the eviction and foreclosure moratorium expiring at the end of the year, there's a lot of talk right now about a huge foreclosure wave coming over the next couple of months to the next couple of years. While I don't believe that to be the case, I do want to spend some time in today's video discussing the pros and cons of buying a foreclosure, as well as a Senate bill that's going to be passed, or it's actually passed in the state of California, SB 1079, that's effective as of January 1st of 2021, that's going to make it easier for owner-occupied buyers to compete against investors when buying foreclosed properties. And towards the end of the video, I'm going to discuss why foreclosures aren't really what they're made up to be. What everybody thinks is such a good deal with buying foreclosures. I'm going to tell you why foreclosures aren't really that good of a deal. But before we get into it, I want to take a minute and introduce myself. My name is Jeb Smith. I'm a real estate broker here in Southern California. And if you're new to me, new to my channel, it's all about real estate. So if you like content like this, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. And if you find the content useful, give me a thumbs up as we're going through the video. So we're going to start today's video by actually diving into the Senate bill. I'm going to read directly from it. I'll also link to it below in the description. And as we're going through it, I'm going to give you my take on it, right? I'm going to break it down in terms that you can understand, because it's not, when reading it, it may be a little bit difficult. So I'm going to tell you exactly what each of those means. And then after that, we'll talk about some of the pros and cons of buying a foreclosure, and again, why it's not all it's made up to be. So let's pull up that bill. So this is, again, Senate Bill 1079, and this is in the state of California. Now, this isn't going to apply anywhere else in the United States at the moment, unless your governor has made similar bill in your area, and maybe you already have something like this, but this is what's going to be coming up as of January 1st. So this bill until January 1st, 2026, so this is going to be a 5-year bill unless extended at some point, would require the notice of sale also to contain a specified notice to a tenant regarding the tenant's potential right to purchase a property containing from 1 to 4 single-family residents pursuant to a process the bill would prescribe. So how this bill works is they go over the old language and then they go over the new language, what the new changes would be. And what that means is basically right now, if you're a tenant in a property and the property gets foreclosed upon, you essentially get kicked out of the property. You don't get an option to buy it. You get cash for keys in most cases, and you're asked to leave the property. Well, this would notify you as a tenant that the property is going to be a foreclosure, and would give you the opportunity to buy that property as an owner occupant to live in the property. So it's basically a notice just allowing you to be a part of the transaction if you're interested. In connection with these properties, the bill would also require a trustee to maintain an internet website and a telephone number to provide specified information on the properties that is free of charge, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So right now, once a property forecloses, it's really hard to get information on those properties. In a lot of cases, unless you have the inside scoop or you're in the business. So as a tenant, it would be very hard normally to find that information. This says it's going to be easier to find that information. It goes on to say this bill until January 1st, 2026, for purposes of the exercise of a power of sale as described above, would prohibit a trustee from bundling properties for the purpose of sale, instead requiring each property to be bid on separately unless the deed of trust or mortgage provides otherwise. So currently, an investor can go in and buy a bulk of properties all at one time. And a lot of times they can get deals on these properties when buying in bulk. This bill says that's no longer going to be an option. Each property is going to have to be separated out and purchased separately, which will give different investors, different owner occupants an opportunity to bid on those properties, when in the past that wasn't the case. And then this is probably the most important part of the bill right here. So the bill until January 1st, 2026 would prescribe an alternative process in connection with a trustee's sale of property under a power of sale contained in a deed of trust or mortgage on real property containing 1 to 4 residential units. In this process, if a prospective owner occupant, as defined, is the last highest bidder, the date upon which specified conditions required of the bidder at the trustee's sale to become final are met. So basically, if it's an owner-occupied buyer buying the property and they were the highest bidder, then that's the end of the process, right? There's nothing more at that time. This bill would require the trustee to require the prospective owner-occupant to provide certain information confirming the owner-occupant status. So if you're buying it as an owner-occupant, that's what you're stating. There's certain documentation that you might have to provide in that case. If a prospective owner-occupant is not the last highest bidder, the bill would grant eligible tenant buyers, as defined, and other eligible bidders as defined, certain rights and priorities to make bids on the property after the initial trustee sale and potentially to purchase it as the last and highest bidder, subject to certain requirements and timelines. So what that says is if an investor is the last highest bidder and they don't plan on living in the property, this bill would allow a time frame after that for an owner-occupant to put in a bid if they plan on leaving there, and at the end of the day, be the last highest bidder. So what they're saying is they really, are gearing foreclosures towards owner-occupants instead of investors. It's going to make it harder for investors to buy these properties in a lot of cases, but maybe not. So we'll talk about that in just a minute in the pros and cons. But this is basically a bill to help owner occupants get in the game, if you will, when it comes to bidding on these properties. So, how does the foreclosure process work? So we're going to talk about that right now. So foreclosure process works. Somebody forecloses on their house, and in the state of California, being a tenant-friendly state, and the court system and so on and so forth, it takes time to foreclose on properties. This doesn't happen overnight. This is a lengthy process. It takes 90 days to file a notice of default, and then goes through the court system. And so there's a lot of back and forth that happens. And if you get an attorney involved on the occupant side or the owner side that's being foreclosed upon, you can drag this out for years. And that's one reason why I don't think you're going to see this huge foreclosure wave coming, in addition to forbearances not really turning into foreclosures and what have you. I'm not going to discuss that there. I will link to a video here where I've talked about it in length. But let's talk about pros of buying a foreclosure. Pros would be that in some cases you can get a good deal. That's really the only pro in buying a foreclosure, is that some cases you can get a good deal. But there's a lot of cons, a lot of downsides to buying a foreclosure. And I think that there's a misconception out there when buying a foreclosure that you're going to get this great deal on a property because it's a foreclosed property. And having experience selling foreclosures for 4 years for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, I know the process and how these work. And in most cases, foreclosures sell pretty close to market value. Now, there are cases where you're buying a property on the courthouse steps. And in those cases, sometimes you can get a deal on those properties. Oftentimes, investors win because they have cash. They're able to outbid everyone. But in most cases, the lender that owns the loan on the property ends up buying the property back and ends up reselling that property. In most cases, those properties have not been trashed. There's a lot of information out there that every single foreclosure is this trash property. They're all torn apart. And I would say there's a small majority of those that actually exist. Most people, when they leave the property, leave it in pretty good shape. And so when the investor, the lender, buys that property back, a lot of times they can just turn around and sell it. Maybe they have to do carpet, paint, maybe some touch-up stuff, but they can put it back on the market. And in most cases, those properties sell pretty close to market value. If not, sometimes higher than market value in a competitive market like the one we're in now. So the misconception is this, that you're going to be able to go out and buy these foreclosures, one, before they ever hit the market and get some great deal on them. I don't see that being the case. And secondly, you're competing against cash. You've got to have cash in most of these times to compete against an investor. And actually, to buy a foreclosure on the courthouse steps, you've got to come in with cash. You can't be there with a loan buying the property. So, that's, the cons, if you will, of buying foreclosures. But here's the other thing. Let's say you're a potential buyer and you're buying a foreclosure. The downsides that people don't understand with buying foreclosures, especially like on the courthouse steps when you're buying these, is that oftentimes you've never seen the property. In some cases you have, oftentimes you haven't. You haven't done inspections on those properties. Those properties can have major issues wrong with them that you're unaware of, and there's nothing you can do about it if you've purchased that property. Secondly, if there's a tenant in the property when you purchase it, it's up to you to evict that tenant. That's additional cost that can take time. Can take years in some cases to get the tenant out of the property. Sometimes there are liens tied to that property that you're not aware of when buying that property from the the courthouse or as a foreclosure. And so there's a lot that buyers don't understand with regards to buying foreclosures. And so, assuming there are foreclosures that come to the market, and there will be, but this wave of foreclosures, it's going to be, for one, tough for buyers to get their foot in the door and buy these because most people aren't sitting around with enough cash to buy foreclosures cash. The investors that buy them, in most cases, end up, if the property needs work, they end up rehabbing the property and selling it for market value. In some cases, they end up buying them and turning them into rentals and doing, selling it at some point in the future. So the idea that there's this huge foreclosure wave coming and that you're going to be able to steal property probably isn't the case. Now you might have a better opportunity to compete based on that SB 1079 that's coming out, but other than that, I would tell you to not hold your breath with being competitive in a foreclosure environment if there is a wave of foreclosures coming. But as I get more information, I'll continue to update you. Right now, as we've discussed, the moratorium expires at the end of the year. Now, some states, some areas are doing foreclosures and evictions, but there's kind of a federal ban at the moment for the most part, for the most of the country, until the end of December. So as January comes around, we'll get more information on this, and I'll continue to update you. If you have questions for me, do me a favor, comment below, reach out to me directly. I'm happy to address them. And if you haven't done so already, hit that like button. And thank you for taking the time to watch. We'll see you again soon. Have an awesome day. Bye-bye.